He told me that I can't tell them. Yeah. It's like driving a Lamborghini. And then in 1 second, I'm leaned up against the wall. I'm like, the whole crowd. We're all been there. Yeah. That's for a bunch of different nonprofits. That's like the veterans group, whatever. Office in there, and then Head Start. Sometimes you have a few people that are like farther out. So, but if you want to yeah. Definitely the more positive side to work. So, but I'm really
This is a band called Jocks. I don't know which way to take it, but it said one person was watching live, so and then they just left. So maybe I offended them already.
Yeah, come on, Andy. Come on. It's very annoying. Oh, exactly what I'm doing.
This is the way that love goes. This is the way like a running number. This is the way that love goes.
This is the way
It was like a little one-off play for the director. He did really good. I also want to because he also told me.
I actually didn't see it till like I was on my way to Johnson
For the
so like when Charles like did the Christmas place or the brands like
the 6th and 7th. There's only 2 weeks left.
they're literally at the same time. We're trying to get their tools and stuff. That weird hybrid like technology marketing.
Wednesday, Thursday, which makes sense because I think our final finish up that way in Vegas. I think. So they don't want to give it that
It's truly a great place. It's not overrated. It's a great place. It's been up to years.
All right, everybody.
I tried to play Fortnite last time. It was like a million internet, and it is the first time. It's horrible, and I hate it. Well, me and Mike played last night, and it was just to the point where like I carried the shotgun, and Joe was just like, and I was like, I'm gonna die. I got like maybe this little super looking at my guy, and I shoot here, and he pushes over here, and I shoot. It was like so far I couldn't even play. So, and then we just started talking. He told me about some of the basketball stuff. Yeah, that's what he told me on some stuff. Well, he told me, are you still in touch with group chat? They told me that this is also being like 7 now. Yeah, well, that's what Jamie said. He got on there and then he kind of, he said like 5 cents, but he said it was about how she's the one who wanted to talk about. No one else trying to talk to him.
It's 10:20, man. It's time.
It was a whole bunch of stuff.
This is an early start. All right, everybody, welcome. What was it, about a month ago? I did a wedding in Nashville, and right before I went up, the whatchamacallit lady, wedding planner, she was like, "Hey, make sure you ask everybody to move up, like to fill in." And I was like, "Okay," so I did. I got up there, and no one moved a muscle, and it was the most awkward, like 20 seconds, because I was like, "Welcome." I was like, "If you don't mind, like, if there's seats in front of you, please move up." And everybody just stared at me. So, if there's seats in front of you guys, could you please move up? I'm just kidding. You don't have to. Make me feel less alone, please. I'm just kidding. All right. This is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna read you guys something. It's colder up here. I'm gonna read you guys something. Give you guys some space to enter in and sit at the table. So I'm gonna play some music, and so feel free to take the space and pray or think or whatever you need to do. And I want to read this over us, and then I'm gonna play a song for you guys. The song is called London, and he sings about London, but I hope you see quickly it's not just about London. So I've been captivated by the song recently, so I'm gonna play it for you guys. And I think there's a lot happening in it, but he sings about London, so we're gonna listen to a song about London here in a second. But I'm gonna play some music. Feel free to do what you need to do. Enter into the space however you need to, want to. I'll read this over us in just a second. Like I said, we'll do a song and then we'll name the good together. So. This table is for the one who thought that they'd be farther along by now, but they're not. It's for the inmate who was promised parole, who promised the parole board he'd be good, but he wasn't. It's for the dim-eyed who showed the path to others, but kept losing their way. It's for the wet-brained who believe that if a little wine was good for the stomach, then a lot must be great. For the liar, the thief. This is fun. He says, it's for the disciple whose cheese slid off his cracker so many times that they said, to hell with cheese and crackers. It's for the young at heart, but old of bone, who's led these days in a way they may not have rather gone. It's for the gentle ones who've lived among wolves, for those who've broken free, those who feel still in bondage, for those who mourn, maybe those who've been mourning most of their lives, yet who are hanging on to the promise that they can be comforted. It's for those who've dreamed of entertaining angels, but have found instead just a few friends of great price. It's for both the younger and the elder prodigals who've come to their senses again and again and again and again. It's for those who strain at pious piffle because they've been swallowed by mercy itself. This table is for myself and those who have been around the block enough times that dare to whisper the ragamuffins rumor, all is grace. That's Brendan Manning's opening to his book, All is Grace. So let me pray. I'm going to play a song for you guys, and we'll keep going. Jesus, we come just as we are with what we have, whether that's the good or the bad or the stuff we're confused about. God, I just ask that you help us to approach the table as we are, not check anything at the door, not leave anything outside, but just come and bring it. And Jesus, I ask that you help us to see that you're always setting the table for us. And in that effort, in that seeing, I ask you help us to set the table for each other. So at this space, there's no rhyme or reason. There's no performances. There's no checklists. We just come as we are. So help us breathe and enter in. Let me pray these things in your name. Amen. I'm going to play a song for you guys. If you want to follow along, it's called London by a guy named Thomas Austin. Where's it at? Here it is. Yeah, just listen in. I think it's really helpful.
I've never been to London. I'm sure that you can tell, but I've heard it described by those who claim to know it well. They say St. Paul's Cathedral stands as regal as a king, but since I've never been to London, I can't tell you anything. I've never been to London on the far side of the sea, and all my friends have been there, but they've never gone with me. I'm pretty sure Big Ben still towers proudly, keeping time, but since I've never been to London, your guess is as good as mine. And I say it's real, though I've never seen it. I have my faith, sometimes I mean it. And I've heard it's beautiful and busy, full of people passing through. There are those who don't believe it, but please don't think I'm going crazy if I do. I've heard a lot of stories that are said on London streets, been moved to tears by songs that sing of London in the spring. And I know facts can seem like fiction, and doubt can feel like faith. But since I've never been to London, don't expect me to explain. When I say it's real, though I've never seen it, I have my faith. Sometimes I mean it. And I heard it's beautiful and busy, full of people passing through. There are those who don't believe it. Please don't think I'm going crazy if I do. I might never see it if it is a real place, and I might not even know it if it looks me in the face. And it could be conspiracies, all this has ever been. But even if there think it's worth believing in, even if there is no one. I think it's worth believing in.
There you go. I messaged that guy this week, and we actually had a really good conversation about faith and doubt and the attempt of like holding on still like with your questions, and you keep going. It's like what we sang last week in that song. I'd rather be a fool than a cynic. And there's an element of our lives where we can keep bumping and stumbling over, tripping over proofs and stuff that like that's helpful in some sense, but it's also can hold us back in some sense. And so I played that song for a reason, because we'll talk about stuff here in a second. But I love the last line. It's very C.S. Lewis-y, where he talks about, C.S. Lewis talks about, even if there is no Aslan, like I'm going to butcher the quote, live as if there is. You guys know what I'm talking about? Am I making that up? But it's like, this seems like a good way. I'm going to give myself to it. I'd rather be a fool than a cynic. I can't keep stumbling over the proofs. So just hold on to all that. All right, now we can name the good, the true, the beautiful that you've experienced and encountered this week, and speak that to each other. Louie's got something.
Get your heart out. Man.
He's like, I'll name some good. Milk. Dark week. What else is stuff? We got a Christmas tree yesterday. That was good.
Decorating was fun.
It was.
The drive up there and the drive back was not fun.
Very
But
true. Yeah.
while we were there, it was great fun.
Yeah, they had like a donut food truck type thing, and it was like $8 for a donut, and I was like, dear God. And I was like, I got to do it. So I bought it. Me and Walt did, and they handed me this plate of like 12 little donuts covered in glaze, and it was awesome. And me and Walt split it, which is not a good idea. So Walt basically ate 6 glazed funnel cake donuts, and then proceeded to lose his marbles on the way home. So
It was an hour drive, so
he was very thankful in the moment.
Yeah, he was like, this is awesome.
We had a pretty slow week at school, not a lot of work since a break is coming up and also finals. So we had a lot of downtime to sit around and do nothing and play board games and things like that. And so we had like all of our friend group together, and we're playing games and just doing all sorts of stuff. It's fun. I mean, we're going places, and it was really good, because I forget sometimes how much I love people and like how good that is for me, especially just because I'm an extrovert. And it was just very life-giving this week.
That's cool. Anything else? All right. Let's do it. You guys ready? Sermon on the Mount, part something. If you want to look at it, go to chapter 5, and we'll be reading in verse 38 here in a second. All right, so we've been tossing around, like, how do we define Mosaic for a while now. Something that feels helpful for me is that we're trying to stay rooted, grounded in historic faith, Christian faith, and let that rootedness help us make room for questions and perspectives. I think it's both possible, holding both at the same time. Today, I think we're dancing with something of a big topic that invites more questions and ponderings for me, and I hope that's really my effort, is just to cause you more issues today. I think it's powerful enough, the teaching from Jesus, to rock our world, to rock your world, but also open enough where it's about wisdom and not certainty. And I think we need to dance with that starting. Like, we need to know that it's about wisdom, not certainty. So today we're talking about revenge, we're talking about violence, and Jesus has a lot to say. It's like 5 verses, but there's a lot happening. The truth is that our world is like very full of violence. You just turn on the news for 12 seconds and you're gonna be bombarded with something going wrong or some kind of crazy violence. I grew up playing with G.I. Joes. Shout out to young Blake. Love G.I. Joes. It's like all built around violence, you know? And then like 7th grade, I started playing Modern Warfare, and it's all about killing. And me and Corey even, and some other friends would play zombies for hours. You just like kill zombies for hours, you know? It's great for a young developing psyche.
Hey, leave zombies out.
It's like deeply ingrained in my system, you know. I can still hear the zombie roar, you know, that's like existing in my 7th to 9th grade brain. Violence is kind of currency in our world. I'm going to read you guys something real quick. I'm just going to skip through it really quickly, but I think it's helpful. Okay, let's go back in time for a little bit. Since the Romans first occupied Israel in about 63 BCE, so about 70 years before the birth of Jesus, their rule grew more and more oppressive. So that whole time, increasingly oppressive. Judea was ruled by Roman procurators, which their chief responsibility was to collect and deliver tax to the empire. Okay, whatever they raised beyond the quota, they could keep. Not surprisingly, they often imposed extra taxes. At the time of Jesus, you could loosely say there's 2 economic buckets, 2 economic classes: the elites, those who have wealth, social status, and power, and the non-elites, everybody else. Equally infuriating to a Judean, Rome took over the appointment of high priest about that time too. So as a result, the high priests, who represented the Jews with God on their most sacred occasions and practices, increasingly came from the ranks of the empire that was oppressing them. Okay, but at the beginning of that common era, birth of Jesus, a group arose named the Zealots. You guys probably know about the Zealots. They were anti-Roman rebels, active for decades. Their most basic belief was that all means were justified to attain political and religious liberty. Sound familiar? All means are justified to attain political and religious liberty. Obviously, the Jews, you guys know the stories. Jews found themselves under hardcore periodic denigration, desecration. The Roman soldiers would often desecrate the temple. There's occasions where they burned the Torah scrolls in their presence. They had the combination of financial exploitation, Rome's unbridled contempt for Judaism, the unabashed favoritism that the Romans had for other people groups around Israel and even living in that time. Obviously sets about the desire for and the action of revolt. Like, of course the Zealots exist, because like when the boot of the empire is on your neck, of course you want to revolt. It's in that kind of world that Jesus says this. You can look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. You've heard that our fathers were told, eye for eye and tooth for tooth, but I tell you not to stand up against someone who does you wrong. On the contrary, if someone hits you on the right cheek, let him hit you on the left cheek too. If someone wants to sue you for your shirt, let him have your coat as well. If a soldier forces you to carry his pack for 1 mile, carry it for 2. When someone asks you for something, give it to him. When someone wants to borrow something from you, lend it to him. You've heard that our fathers were told, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Then you'll become children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun shine on good and bad people alike. And he sends rain to the righteous and unrighteous alike. What reward do you get if you only love those who love you? Why, even tax collectors do that. If you're friendly only to your friends, are you doing anything out of the ordinary? Even the Gentiles do that. Therefore, be complete, just as your Father in heaven is complete. About 30 or 33 AD, Jesus was arrested, tried by Sanhedrin. Pontius Pilate sentenced him to flagellation. He was brutally flogged. After carrying out the sentence Pilate handed him to the soldiers, he was led to Golgotha, crucified there between two criminals. According to Gospel of Mark, he endured torment of crucifixion, hours until he died. About 30-ish years later, a new Roman leader stole vast quantities of silver from the temple, outraged Jewish masses, obviously, and the Jews responded with a riot, and they wiped out a small Roman garrison stationed in Jerusalem, killed them all. The Roman ruler in Syria sent a larger force of soldiers to retaliate. The Jewish crew, insurgents, tried to fight back, and they won. It was a heartening victory with a terrible consequence. Okay, many Jews suddenly became convinced that they could defeat Rome, and the zealots' rank grew astronomically. But the Jews never did achieve such a victory again. When Rome did return, they came back with 60,000 heavily armed and highly professional troops. They launched this crazy attack on that radicalized Jewish area, and the Romans vanquished Galilee, and an estimated 100,000 Jews were killed or sold into slavery. Obviously, embittered refugees, those who survived or escaped, fled. And because of their anger, they responded by killing anyone in their leadership who was not as radical as they, calling for a radical upheaval of Rome. Thus, more moderate Jewish thinkers who were leading everything were dead. All killed by fellow Jews in that season. And then Rome comes back. They besiege the city. Inside the city, the Jews are engaged in a suicidal civil war. And in later accounts of this, rabbis declare that the revolt's failure and the temple's destruction was not due just to Roman military superiority, but to causeless hatred among each other. While the Romans would have won, obviously, the Jewish Civil War hastened the victory. And you guys know the story, during the summer of AD 70, they breached the walls of Jerusalem, destroyed the temple. It's estimated about 1 million Jews died in that Great Revolt. It's called the Great Revolt. Intense. It's in that world leading up to Jesus. Jesus gives those words, and about 30 years later, that's what happens. I think Jesus is putting his finger on something for us that's not as bizarre, I think, if we just step into it. Jesus gives some crazy examples here. I'm going to take the first half of that section I just read about revenge. We'll talk about the loving your enemies later. But there's something powerful there. So remember, Jesus comes on that scene offering good news of another way. The kingdom of God is presently available to you. It's the good news that God wants to live and give God's life to you, live it through you. And nothing makes you ineligible for that gift. We're invited to live with open hands, open hearts. Let that blessing come to us and through us. The kingdom of God is one of love and grace and joy and everyone having enough. Pure welcome and embrace with a glorious purpose, to quote Loki season 2. Anybody? Just me. And be a light for a hurting world. Alia Delio, she's a Christian mystic. She says, to follow Jesus is to be a whole maker, like WHOLE maker. Essentially to love the world into new being in life. Beautiful vision that Jesus launched for us. So keep your Bible open, chapter 5. Mirror that passage. I had it open right here. Let's look at it one more time. Just look at verse 38. You've heard it said, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Give to the one who asks. Do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. I think Jesus has been really subversive. But think about what he says. Is Jesus really asking us to just be passive? It's an easy take from it. In the face of abuse and injustice, are we just supposed to be doormats? What if your neighbors are being abused? What if there's an injustice like physically around you? What do you do? What if people are misusing their power? And then what about war? And what about self-defense? And what about all that, serving in the military? There's lots of questions that I'm not going to answer. But I think Jesus gives some really helpful wisdom. Okay, 38. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth. He quotes two passages of scripture. Exodus 21, it says, if there's serious injury on someone's life, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. That's Exodus 21. Leviticus 24, sorry, it's three passages. Leviticus 24 adds something. It says, the one who has inflicted the injury must suffer the same injury. Okay, Deuteronomy 19, show no pity. Life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. The eye for eye and tooth for tooth is actually a widespread ancient law. You can find it lots of places. It was a pretty regular principle. But at best, it keeps violence in circulation. Okay? If you gouge out my eye, I want to return the favor and gouge out your eye. It just keeps violence happening in a circle. Violence always begets more violence, always. Keeps in circulation. There's this lie of redemptive violence, as in I can just cause more violence and it's going to redeem the violence that you caused. And it's the same concept. We're just keeping this shit in the circulation. You know, it's just the same thing over and over again. At first glance, we can say it sounds barbaric. Okay. And Gandhi is famous for saying an eye for an eye will only make the whole world blind. It's good thought. But think about it. Okay. When someone hits you, like your impulse is to hit back. At least it is for me. And usually it's not just equal. Like I want to make it worse, you know, like I want to punish you. You said that about me behind my back, I'm going to attack you and your character or something like that. We do it on a global standpoint, like on the country. You do something to us, we're going to bomb your entire country. Like we're going to up the ante on you. Our bent is not always to justice or equality in that sense. Our bent is usually towards revenge and retaliation. Like we want to punish you and show you that we got bigger guns than you do. The judge in their day, in their court, all that was supposed to say, like, you know, if the punishment fits the crime, it's supposed to be even. But Jesus takes the command and sets it aside and says, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, not anymore. Kind of sets it aside. I think it's just because Jesus knows our tendency towards revenge and retaliation. Let's keep going. 39, where he says, don't resist an evil person. Some other translations say, don't take revenge on someone. Don't set yourself against XYZ. Don't show opposition against an evil person. It's really interesting, and I nerded out for a while, but I'm not going to work through it. It's a really hard translation to work, or a passage in Greek to work through. When it says don't resist, that's very straightforward. A lot of people think there's some controversy with King James early on, and where they translated it, don't resist. He wanted people not to resist his rule. Really interesting stuff. I'm not going to go through that. The Greek word just means to oppose, to cause opposition. Okay. And I think a better way of saying, if you trace the lectionary, like what they're saying, is what this. They say opposition by matching. Okay. It's what that Greek means. I think Jesus is saying, don't react violently against the one who is acting violently against you. Okay. I think that makes sense. In Jesus' world, there's lots of violent movements. Zealots are around town ready to take down Rome. That was their goal, to take down Roman Empire. And of course, violent uprisings are what people want to do when the empire's on your neck. And Jesus is saying, don't take part in that kind of violence. You can't match violence with violence. Don't participate. When he says the right cheek, just bear with me. This is really fun. The right cheek, the blow on the right cheek was the most grievous insult that you could take. Okay. In the ancient world, the right hand is what you use to hit someone. Okay. If that's the case, if you're hitting someone on their right cheek, it's implying that you're backhanding them. Okay. Physically, you have to hit with your right hand, backhand. It presumes a backhanded slap. So this is an honor shame society. The backhanded slap on the cheek is a physical, I'm going to hit you, but it's also a challenge to your honor. Because what you're saying is that you're an inferior to me. You backhand someone who's beneath you. So masters backhanded their slaves. Men backhanded women. Romans backhanded the Jews. So backhanded slap was not just physical, it was a dishonoring move saying to that person, you're beneath me. Okay. So if you're in the same status in their day and time, if you're on the same level, there's a civil fine for backhanding someone because we're equals. Okay. So if you turn the other cheek, if someone hits you, they backhand you, your left cheek or your right cheek, they backhand you, and you offer them the other, they can't re-backhand you again because you're offering the opposite side. So what you're saying is you have to hit me as an equal. So hitting someone as an equal, the only proper way to hit someone as an equal is to punch them straight in the face, which sounds great. So what you're saying is, okay, you backhanded me. You're going to turn your face, give them the other cheek. What you're saying is you have to treat me like an equal. We're peers. Okay. You have to punch me if you want to attack again, which is the only way to treat an equal there. Jesus, being a subversive teacher, is saying to re-engineer the situation in such a way that a person who's demeaning you, if they want to keep doing that, they have to treat you like an equal with dignity. Does that make sense? There's a whole slap. Do we need to act it out real quick? That's not a joke, but I'm serious. Gabe, get up here. Yeah, I'm not going to hit you, but. All right, this is your right cheek, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, everybody. So if I'm going to hit him, I have to backhand him this way. Okay. So now you offer me your other cheek. I can't backhand him. Okay. So if he's offering me this cheek, I'm just have to punch him. Okay. So this is crazy. So Jesus is saying, you can sit down, that's fine. Jesus is saying, thank you, Gabe. Jesus is saying you offer them the other cheek and they can't, they're going to have to punch you, which says, I see you as an equal. Pretty subversive, pretty interesting. And think about this. As a person hits you, you have some options. One, you could just run, activate the flight part of your brain. Or two, you could fight back. You could hurt back, match them evenly, or do something worse. But here Jesus is saying, is there a creative third way forward? Jesus says to offer the other cheek. You look at the attacker as an equal. And as you do, you're reclaiming your dignity. You're not an inferior. You're not beneath them. You're asserting your dignity in that stance, in that position. You're not running and you're not fighting back. You're finding this creative third way. Your efforts, this is what one translate or one commentary, your efforts might even expose their sense of superiority and might bring a change of heart. I'm willing to go through it again, but you're going to have to treat me like an equal. He's inviting a creative and conscious response. Let's hold those two words. A creative and conscious response, a unique third way, where violence is not returned. The dignity of the victim should be reasserted. If someone's disrespecting and attacking you, the wisdom of Jesus calls us to creatively engineer the situation where your dignity is reasserted. And just to zoom out for a second, there is indeed a breakdown in our world when it comes to how to deal with evil. The liberal progressive left tends to be overly passive and often idealistic about our world and doesn't always process through the implications of our decisions or how we deal with evil in the world. Where the conservative right tends to be overly reactive and war obsessed, where all the money just goes to war tanks. And the point seems to be that both are missing this third way that Jesus is talking about. I actually think that we long for that. The black and white, the simplistic, easy answers is not as satisfying. I think Jesus is saying you have incredible dignity and value as an image of God, an image bearer, and you can creatively find another way. I keep going, verse 40. The poorest people in the empire would have two garments, inner garment, outer garment. The outer garment also doubled as a blanket, so you kind of had to use it. And the theft of a cloak, which is your outer garment, would often lead to like a legal formality, like you get sued. So don't just think your t-shirt, like this is like prime, like you only have two options, inner one, outer one. So it's a very important garment, and most people owned only two, okay? And this is a big deal. So option one, you can run. Give in, run. Option two, you could fight. You lawyer up. You go after their shirt, their car, ask for more money, up the ante, try to punish them for coming at you. But Jesus says, what if there's a creative third way? What you could do is just strip naked. Give them the second coat, is what he says. They take your first garment. You hand over your second one of your own free will and volition. Assert your dignity as someone who's not oppressed, but as a human. And you're asserting, you say, you can see me as a human. I'm going to give you the second one, actually. They may walk out, or even, dare we say, you might expose their greed, their ruthlessness, their oppression, their evil. And I think this is what Jesus is calling us to, is even to surrender the outcomes. Like, Jesus is calling us to be the kind of people whose character is not dependent on the outcome of your effort of love. James Finley has a quote. He says, "We seek to be the healing presence in the world, with a peace that's not dependent on the outcome of our efforts, because it's the peace of God on which everything depends that sustains us unexplainably." So there's a peaceful presence, a person whose inner peace is not dependent on the outcome of their accuser, XYZ. As long as they apologize, as long as they XYZ, as long as they own it, whatever you need them to do. Jesus is saying maybe you should surrender that. Like, surrender the outcome and like have this posture towards them. Once they get it, once they understand why I'm hurt, once they come clean, whatever. Jesus seems to be inviting us into a way of human where we're free from that. Because I don't think we'll ever be free, like if we just stay in that zone. Keep going. 41. Asks you to carry your pack. Roman soldiers had the legal right to make you do this, okay? When Jesus says this, many people as his hearers would have done this. A Roman soldier had the legal right to ask you to carry their pack for a mile, which is really crazy what Jesus says. He's inviting a non-resistance and even like a loving service. Like, you're going to carry it even further, actually. The Jewish hierarchy favored the status quo with Rome. Like, let's keep Rome happy in a sense. But there's also many revolutionaries who wanted to revolt. So what Jesus is saying is really interesting. So the second mile, take it a second mile. So the soldiers could legally subjugate you to carry their gear, which is about 80 pounds, for a mile. Legally allowed 1 mile, okay? If they asked you to carry their pack, you had to do it. If a soldier was caught mandating someone going 1 step over a mile, there were serious consequences for the soldier, because if you force the people too much, they go too far, there's going to be more uprisings, more revolts, it's going to be more of a headache, more issue. So it's tricky. But let's just say you get forced to do it. Soldier makes you carry their pack. You have 2 options. Option 1, you have a flight response in a sense. You pick up the pack. You're just silent, seething on the inside. You can't run, because if you do try to run, they're just going to do something worse to you. Inflict brutal force on you. Option 2, you join the zealots. You grab the dagger from your ankle and you slit the man's throat and you like cause the next uprising. But Jesus is inviting a third way. See what he's doing? He's being very creative. Third way. What if you said, sure, I will carry it, but then you take 1 more step after a mile? 1 more step, 2 steps, 3 steps. You keep going. Jesus envisions shocking compliance, voluntary cooperation to go beyond what the soldier is demanding. Going the second mile is non-resistance. Like, it's a new creative third way. You're not oppressed anymore. You took that step. You did it. They didn't make you. You're asserting your volition, your power, your dignity in that situation. You just passed the mile marker 1. All their steps were marked. The Roman soldier anticipates you handing the pack back. But what happens the moment you just take the next step, you know? Again, your status is lower than his. So as you take 1 more step, you're asserting your agency. You're showing up as a peer. You're saying, I'm a free human, and I'm going to make this decision. And my first decision of being a free person is I'm going to serve you. You're not lower than them at that point. If they want to keep you lower, they have to beg you for their pack back at that point, because they can't keep you going anymore, because it's dire consequences for them. It's a creative response. It's a dignity being reasserted. You're choosing dignity. And I think, again, I'm trying to hit those words again. There's a difference between reaction and response. If you notice abuse and injustice, there's instant reactions that are really probably good and true and necessary and beautiful. There's a hurt inside of you that kind of rises up and says, that's not good. But often, if those aren't tamed and controlled, they come out blunt or not thought out or not wise or just cause more pain in the world, if we're honest. Jesus is coaching us to go from unconscious reaction to conscious response. Okay? In reaction, it's too easy to go from violence to violence. I'm just going to pay you back. In my blunt reaction, I'm just going to respond. To return with a matching hand, is what that Greek word is talking about. Or even increase. I want to increase the bombs on you. It's what they just did to you. You're just increasing it, you know? A practice that we could take on from Jesus is when we have a situation that feels like this. I think it's intentionally vague to leave it right there. It feels like this, take a pause and try to find the status quo and just tilt it. Go through the options. Here's flight, here's fight, here's the left one, here's the right one. What if there's a creative and conscious third way? What's a choice I can make to reassert dignity or fight for dignity in this moment where violence is not the only option on the table? I think Jesus is trying to open our eyes, open our minds to say violence is not the only option. And think about how freeing that life could be. When you're attacked, you don't naturally and intrinsically attack back. Like, I want to be free from that. Not just because you're so spiritual and you stop yourself, but because you become the kind of person who doesn't feel or have the overwhelming need to punch back. I was recently trolled on Facebook like 4 days ago. Big surprise. And you know what I did? Man, I went swinging. I was really upset. I went swinging. And yeah, really embarrassing at what I said. And it didn't go well, believe it or not. I battled with that guy for the whole day. And hours of my day spent just seething and preparing responses and not thinking about what I was saying because I just said a lot of crazy stuff to him. And it was not good. Not a good way. But what I'm trying to say is the path that I chose was to retaliate and speak worse things over him. And it put me through hell. Because the action of it was so demented in me, but also like the after effects, I was like, that is horrifically not the way of Jesus, I would say. And so I had to work through that. And I owned a lot of stuff with him. Anyways, I want to be free from that. The intrinsic natural desire, like I'm going to get you back. Do you ever feel that? I want to be free from that. I think Jesus is actually saying like it's actually good and true and possible for you. Let's hit this last couple real quickly. Where he talks about giving to those who are in need. He switches it. The first couple examples were like you're the oppressed one, but now he kind of switches it. Now you're the one in power. Jesus makes a turn, applying the wisdom to like you are in power and you have opportunity to give. Beggars were widespread. The Old Testament prioritizes, like it's good to give. But Jesus goes further in emphasizing complete and unselfish giving. So options on the table. One, you can just give to the beggar what they ask. Option two, you could say, no, this is the land of opportunity. Get a job. Should have went to trade school. Shouldn't have gone to school to begin with. Both are being said. Or option three, find a creative and conscious third way. Jesus says, give to them, but not out of generosity, but something bigger. If you look at Luke's account of the teachings here, it's in Luke chapter 6. Jesus says this, if someone asks you for something, give to him. If someone takes what belongs to you, don't demand it back. Treat other people as you would like them to treat you. Later, he says, give, and you will receive. The full measure, compacted, shaken together, overflowing, will be put back into your lap. For the measure with which you measure out will be used to measure back to you. So give in such a way that is full measure, a generous helping, and it'll be back poured into your hands, all that you can hold, because that's how I would want to be treated. There's an equality here. It's not just when you're being oppressed, it's when you're in the person of power. You can spin it and do it the exact same way. That's exactly how I'd want to be treated. I'm not just going to give measured. I'm going to go above. All right, so what's all this mean? It's about seeking a creative response to end evil without violence. I think that's what it's about. The point is to come up with alternative solutions to revenge. And I don't think violence is ever included in the way of Jesus. And of course, Christians disagree on this. For the first 400 years of church history, violence was just outside of the picture. No one thought it was part of the way of Jesus. If you kind of zoom out in our culture now, a lot of Christians will include violence or necessary violence or just war theory. And it's like, when is murder okay? When is violence okay? Is it okay to defend someone? Or if it's the lesser of two evils to go? And there's lots of things there. Lots of debates I think are worthwhile. But I think if we're going to sit around the table on anything, it's that Jesus is asking us to reject the clear black and white options on the table. Fight or fly. As students of Jesus, I think we're called to look for a creative third option. And just speaking of Jesus, 1 Peter 2, says this: it's commendable if someone bears up under the pain of unjust suffering because they're conscious of God. I love that phrase, conscious of God. But how is it to your credit if you receive a beating for doing wrong and endure it? If you suffer for doing good and you endure it, this is commendable. To this you are called because Christ suffered for you, leaving you an example that you should follow. He committed no sin, and no deceit was found in his mouth. When they hurled their insults at him, he did not retaliate, and when he suffered, he made no threats. Instead, he entrusted himself to him who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the cross, so that he might die to sins and live for righteousness. Jesus said that his kingdom, is not like the kingdom of the world, so his followers need not violence to overthrow the oppressors. It's in John 18. Jesus stops his followers from fighting back when he's arrested. He even heals one person when their ear gets cut off in Luke 22. And when Jesus knows he's about to die, he reminds his followers of something that happened in Genesis 6. He talks to Peter and he says, all who draw the sword will die by the sword. So circulation, Jesus is saying, I'm trying to get you out of. The systems of the world, you have no problem using violence to return violence with violence and violence and violence. And Jesus entrusts himself to a system to put an end to it. When he attacked, he didn't attack back. When someone commented on his pictures, he didn't retaliate. He didn't tweet back. The best way to respond to evil, as seen in the life and teachings of Jesus, is cruciform love. Suffering and self-sacrificial love. Often outrageously so. You absorb the evil into your body, and the hope is that you stop evil in its tracks. Jesus not only taught what I would say is nonviolence, but he lived it. Instead of retaliation, he absorbed it into himself, practicing a relentless givenness to the other. Didn't take revenge, didn't retaliate, didn't fight evil with more evil. Instead, he responded thoughtfully, consciously, love, grace, truth. I think Jesus is inviting us into that same rhythm, to trust something that's happening there. He gave himself to be broken by us in order to change how we see reality, in order to change how we see God. For centuries, thousands of years, humans have been killing, like murder and violence has been like part of us for a long time. But now the story of Jesus is that God lets himself be killed by us. Not participating in the system, but to put an end to the system. It's one long critique of violence. You could really chase it over the entire Bible. And I wish we could, but you can chase it over one of the first things that happen in the Bible is a brother kills a brother. And it's not good. Jesus agreed to carry the mystery of suffering from evil in order to change that in us. He agreed to trust himself to the mystery that revenge and tit-for-tat retaliation does not lead to life. But self-sacrificial givenness actually does. Jesus teaches us to reverse the engines in our thinking. That assumes that getting even with blood for blood is not how the world gets healed. And Jesus actually takes it into himself and lets us kill him. If we have the eyes to see, it's actually a massive change in how we can see and be in the world. Richard Rohr says, this is meant to utterly shock our hearts and turn us back to trust and love the source that's within all things, even in that enemy of ours that's attacking us. So in some, violence, I think, is incompatible with the life and teachings of Jesus. Now, there's plenty of holes in that bucket, for sure. And there's lots of questions there that I'm not prepared to answer. But the main question is, like, does it work? Does nonviolence work? And if you study movements, I think it does, but you have to surrender your definition of what works and what doesn't work. Did the life of Jesus work? Well, we killed him. So does it work? Well, you have to kind of surrender your definitions of it. Some of the best moments in Christian history have been when Christians take this seriously, practicing nonviolence. And also some of the worst moments in Christian history have when we ignore this teaching, like the Crusades, for instance. You can name any major war, a lot of major wars have been on the basis of religion. And some of the darkest moments have been when we don't take this teaching seriously. So we need to get a pause between our reactions and our responses. Like, we need that pause to become people who can respond wiser, better, more of a Jesus-y fashion. God gives us that creative response. And it's a page one move. Like God is like orchestrating the world in Genesis 1, creating something beautiful out of a chaos. And he's like affirming dignity and goodness in things and in people. And like we get to participate in that same thing now. There's a creative way of affirming goodness and dignity in people, and we can participate in that. It's not just violence for violence, and I don't think that actually ends us anywhere. When we follow this teaching of Jesus, I think we discover God's life being lived in us and through us. This is the way of Jesus. I think God thinks so highly of us. He wants to give us his life. And we give ourselves to creatively imagining a way forward that doesn't involve retaliation or revenge. I think we participate in a deeper fashion in that way. I know this brings up a lot of questions I'm not going to answer. A lot of emotions too. Like, is it too abstract? I mean, Israel and Palestine are literally in war right now. So like, what do? You know, what about your family members who are in the military? If you're in the military, if you've done stuff, it's like, there's lots of stuff. What if someone invades your home? What if you're in the military, but you don't serve on the lines? Like, there's a lot of things here. Am I supposed to have a weapon in my home? If I'm not supposed to have a weapon in my home? It's complicated. But again, back to what I said in the beginning, I think it's about wisdom. I want to trust myself to this, as this is a better path forward. It's a safe place to process these things. I want to read you guys a quote real quick, and then we're going to take communion. This is from Thich Nhat Hanh. He has a book called Living Buddha, Living Christ, and it's actually really good. He talks about peace and war and stuff. And I'm going to play this or read this, and then we'll take communion together. We often think that peace is the absence of war, that if powerful countries would reduce their weapons, we would have peace. But if we look deeply into weapons, we see our own minds, our own prejudices, our own fears, and our own ignorance. Even if we transport all the bombs to the moon and roots of war and the roots of bombs are still there, in our hearts and minds, sooner or later, we will probably make new bombs. To work for peace is to uproot war from ourselves and from the hearts of others. To prepare for war, to give millions of men and women the opportunity to practice killing day and night in their hearts, is to plant millions of new seeds of violence, anger, frustration, and fear that will pass on for generations to come. It reminds me of what Paul says in Colossians 3. He says, above all these things, clothe yourselves with love, which binds everything together perfectly, and let the shalom that comes from the Messiah be your heart's decision maker. Let the shalom which comes from the Messiah be your heart's decision maker. There needs to be some internal work done. I think that the person of Jesus does it. War is not out there, it's also inside of me. The violence that I have and desire for people, and message me on Facebook, that needs to be worked on. And we have a rabbi who's teaching us another way, but also a faithful friend who's present and gentle towards me. He gave himself to another way to liberate me from that. So we can take a posture of prayer. I'm going to read our Eucharist reading, and we'll take communion. It's gluten-free bread back there, wine on the left, juice on the right. I'll read this in a second, but get back there when you're ready. Take some of the bread. You can dip it. You can take it in the moment if you want, or you can take it back at your chair and pray or however you need to, and then I'll close this out in a second. So let me read this over us, and then we'll take communion. This sacrament is not given to us merely in order that we do something, but that we may become someone, that we may be Christ in the world, perfectly identified with him. Eucharist increases and perfects our spiritual life itself in order that we may be perfected in our being, our personality, our union and likeness with God. So we come to a table, not to a set of performances. We come to a table, not to a set of intellectual requirements. We come to a table that's beyond worthiness and unworthiness, togetherness, messiness, know-how and not know-how. Jesus took the bread. He broke it as an image of his body being broken for the healing and the repair of the world and the world of you. Through taking the broken bread, we're leaning into both the reality and the posture of Christ in the world. Jesus took the cup, filled it with the fruit of the vine that sustains us and is a symbol of life. And he said it's an image of his blood being shed for the healing and the repair of the world and the world of you. Through taking the cup, we're leaning into both the reality and the posture of Christ in the world. The bread and the wine nourishes us that we may nourish others. As we take into ourselves the healing and repairing work of God, we become conduits of blessing in a hurting world. We contemplate the giving of Jesus, lean into the loving mystery that's at the center of all things, calling us to participate. We dedicate ourselves to make the body and spirit of Jesus real in our world and throughout our life as a community. What we symbolize here in this holy space and this holy action, we make real by our service when we go forth from this place. So take a second, pray, think. When you're ready, you can go take communion and take it at the spot if you need to. If you want to, take it back to your chair and pray wherever you need to. God, as we talk about the specifics of violence and revenge and evil and what to do, it's easy to leave it out there. And Jesus, I know that you're always taking it to the heart. And I pray for freedom for myself and my friends here, that the violence inside of us, we'd be free from it. That which wants to perpetuate it, evil in the world, retaliation in the world, that you'd put a death to that in us. Your self-sacrifice and unselfishness and love and givenness to us, I pray that that moves us deeply. And I ask for wisdom for what this means and how we take this and walk out here. I pray that we'd be nonviolent people, but we'd learn how to process and think critically about our lives, and that we'd follow you. So God, we think, we ponder, we give ourselves to the table, remembering how you gave yourself for us. And I pray that we can walk out these doors and do the same thing for others, even those who take from us. And we pray these things in your name. Amen. All right, everybody. There's that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna do the next Love Your Enemies at another time. We'll probably do some Advent Christmas stuff coming up, so we may just push pause on some of them out for a little bit, or we're just gonna keep going. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But next week, we're gonna do more of like a Thanksgiving thing. We did it last year, where everybody just kind of brought food and or made food, and just kind of eat together here and do something a little bit more laid back in that fashion. So next Sunday morning, we're just gonna have like a Thanksgiving breakfast of sorts here, and we'll communicate it all through GroupMe, and so we'll know who's coming and what to bring and all that. So I do think the kids thing just got rebooted. Is that right? It's today the last. Okay, we just use the same schedule, or okay, cool. All right, sounds good. Well, this Thursday's Thanksgiving, so cheers. We're still hanging out. No, I'm just kidding. So basically, my house. So Thanksgiving, my house. No, I'm just kidding. We'll see you guys Sunday for like a breakfast Thanksgiving thing. So, sound good? Great. Cheers.